Degrees of Reality. I'm Professor Barberdale, and this is week 10 of a 10-week term. So our last class will be Thursday, and right after class on Thursday, the final exam will open. It will be open through the following Thursday, 5 o'clock. So don't forget the lab closes early the Thursday of final exam week. It closes for the term. Thursday, March 17th at 5 p.m. That means the very latest you can arrive is 4 o'clock. So, and that doesn't mean that everyone in the class should show up there at 4 o'clock. So, but make sure to get there before 4 o'clock on Thursday the 17th. Earlier is going to be less stressful for you and for the staff there as well. So, if my office hours for final exam week will be a little different than the regular term, so I'll post those on Moodle, and then if you want to make an appointment to come see me outside of those hours, I'll have a lot of time freed up because there won't be any classes during finals week. Let's see, the extra credit exam closes this Friday, so if you take it, it will replace the lower of your 2 midterm scores. It is not a substitute for the final. You can use a 3x5 note card for it if you like. It'll be roughly 50-50 material from the first midterm, material from the second midterm. If you score lower than your midterm, there'll be no penalty. So it can only help you, it can't hurt you. So other than the time invested, your score can only go up. Generally, I don't put a curve on the thing because it's, you've had the material before. Some of the same questions are used, so there's a little more difficult perhaps, and you got more material to know. But typically, people do better than one of their exams because tendency is somebody, you get a low score on one of your exams, and the extra credit exam for most people it boosts them up a little bit.
How many questions is there?
I think it's about 50 or 60. 50? Okay, thanks. All right, let me call up my PowerPoint here. It's got to have a Young Americans for Liberty, an improved sexist name, or not sexist, ageist name. But what are you going to do? I don't qualify for membership. I'm too old. But it's a student group. I'm just a faculty advisor. But the median age for students here at Lane is 30. So, and all groups on campus are open to anybody, regardless of age, gender, sexual orientation, race, natural origin, religion, and all that stuff. So everybody's welcome there. We even have some people that aren't students, so nobody cares. We had a pretty good turnout too. I'm heartened by it. And if you know anyone who's interested in an internship, the internship that I have for either work study or for co-op, send them my way or send me an email or Moodle message. All right. Looking at all these summer conferences, the deadlines come up. There's one called Freedom Fest, and it's in Vegas every year. That's a lot of fun. Vegas is a lot of fun too. I always stay over a couple extra days, go see some shows. I still haven't seen Penn and Teller or the Blue Man Group. Those are two that I'm anxious to see. Let's see. It's a PDF. No good. There we go. Penn and Teller, I hear, are really good too.
Didn't we already do the problem of evil?
Yeah, but it's in the same one, the meaning of life. So it's the same PowerPoint. I'll repost it when I post the archives. Current slide. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day, to the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesteryears have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle. Life is but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It's a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. So this is from Macbeth. And this is, it's Act 5, Scene 5. This is near the end of the play where Macbeth's about to pay the piper, and all of the seeds he's sown earlier on are coming back to bite him in the hindquarters. So, and this is an expression of despair and the feeling that life is meaningless, right? So it's talking about the sort of the ongoingness of life and how it sort of creeps on and it's always the same and nothing ever changes. And this and it seems like the fact that life ends is part of what makes it empty. All our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. So life is being compared to a candle. So you burn for a little while and you're blown out, right? A walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour up on the stage and then is heard no more. So basically, you're a bit player in a big, in a big production, and you come in and you're like guard number 2, and you come in and say, "Sir, the prisoner has escaped." Right, and then the king says, well, go find him, and you run off stage, and that's your thing, and that's seen as a metaphor for life. You say your few paltry lines, and then you exit stage left, and nobody ever hears from you again. This tale told by an idiot. An idiot is a kind of an old-timey word. Now it means like a foolish person, but in Shakespeare's time, an idiot was like a developmentally challenged person of low intellect. So what's that?
I don't see the change.
You don't see the change. So trying to think of the example that doesn't involve politics. What do you call an idiot with a law degree? Senator. No, the idiot is basically a mentally handicapped person. So I don't know if you ever I've for a short time worked with developmentally disabled people, and one of the things you get somebody that maybe has a speech impediment and tells you this kind of disjointed story in a thick-tongued voice that you can sort of have problems understanding, and it makes absolutely no sense. And that's sort of what they're thinking about. Imagine, and typically, the village idiot was some homeless guy, or sometimes he'd sleep in a barn or something, and they dress him up in funny clothes, and he'd be there to raise people's spirits. Not a very nice way to deal with developmentally disabled, but it was what it was. So just imagine some guy coming up to you and telling you this incoherent story, and it makes no sense. Maybe I don't know if you ever had a homeless person, maybe with a mental impairment, and come up to you and start talking to you, and they're telling you stuff, and you're like, I have no idea where this story is going, and you get lost, and then you're like, this makes no sense at all. Well, that's the idea. Life is like that. It's like an incoherent story from a person who is suffering from a mental impairment or disability and is unable to tell a coherent narrative. And what does the story mean? It doesn't mean anything. It's just the babblings of a lunatic. So, so that even in Shakespeare's time, and go back, I'm sure this anxiety about the meaning of life, goes back probably as far as humanity, and it seems caught up with this idea of death. So You see this in Bertrand Russell in his essay, A Free Man's Worship. One of the earliest things Russell wrote and still sort of celebrated as a humanist manifesto. And so he starts out talking about science, and everybody is all bullish about science at the time. The Industrial Revolution is in full swing. People are captivated by the idea of progress, of what human beings might be able to achieve. But he says, you look at science. Science presents, he says, a pitiless universe which is blind to human suffering. So the universe doesn't give a damn about you. So you look out empirically, the universe is a very hostile place. Human beings have to sort of group together and come up with technology that protects them from the elements, that protects them from predators, that protects them from other humans, that tries to protect them from disease and repairs their bodies when they fall apart or become injured. So, but eventually it's all for naught and it ends in a pine box, and then the worms, and then the darkness, right? There's an old horror movie, I think it's called And Then the Darkness. And that's sort of what your life is, right? It's like fill in the blank and then the darkness. So he talks about this idea of an afterlife, and he says, the belief in an afterlife is sort of a cruel joke. People say it fills them with hope and gives them something to look forward to. But because you're always thinking, okay, yeah, my life sucks now, but someday there'll be heavenly reward, and I'll be in heaven with God, and there'll be choirs of angels, and God will wipe away all my tears. And if every day you wake up thinking about how great heaven would be, by contrast, you look at your life now and you're like, oh, my life sucks. I'm not in, I can't sing songs in the heavenly court right now, and I'm stuck with, my tears flow every day, and my body's racked with pain. But someday I'll have this wonderful relief from all my suffering. And Russell says that this looking forward to something better makes you think that what you're living in now is worse, because you only think about something as being bad in comparison to something else. So you have this fictitious, in Russell's estimation, this fictitious afterlife that you're comparing your actual life to, and it makes your actual life look like it sucks. You ever I'm thinking example. I have like a cracked tail light. I just went and I'm got my old 1994 Toyota Corolla. I'm there with like the red duct tape, like taping up my tail light. And I'm kind of being really careful. I make sure not to get any creases or seams, and I put it down there. And I look at there, and I'm like admiring my handiwork. I'm like, that's a pretty good job. Doesn't look too bad. And then this guy in like a sports car goes by, and it's like just been washed, and it's got like the spoiler in the back. It's got some stereo that's going thump, thump, thump as he drives by. And I look back at my Toyota and I go, my car sucks, right? So that's kind of what heaven does for you. You think someday all my problems will be gone, and I'll be free from pain, and free from sorrow, and free from misery. And then you think, and right now I got misery in spades, and maybe it makes your life look even worse than it actually is. So, and then he says, another thing is this whole sin and salvation mythology. This idea you're a bad, bad person. And that you should be on your knees all the time apologizing to God for your multitude of sins. And it's like, oh, I went out and I got drunk last night and went home with someone and had wild sex. I feel so dirty and guilty and bad about that, even though at the time it was kind of fun. But right now I just feel this sense of remorse, and I'm worried that God's going to punish me. And he says that whole thing, it robs you of natural pleasures, of enjoying sex, of enjoying your wine, of enjoying, all the things that you might go out and do that the Bible describes as, the lust of the eyes and the pride of life. And Russell will say, well, have some pride in your life. Enjoy your life. Go out there and enjoy making money. Enjoy lying around in the sun doing nothing. Enjoy sex. Enjoy maybe go out and go to Vegas and gamble away a few $100s, and go watch some showgirls, and then go off to the bars and drink some. And enjoy your life. You see people in Vegas, it's fun to watch them down the street. And I watch people like staggering down a Las Vegas Boulevard there, and they always look happy. I never see anybody like, looking down at their shoes saying, oh, woe is me, a sinner. Or racking, wringing their hands and thinking, oh, my life is meaningless. And they're like, woohoo! Right? Some of that's... Yeah, some of that, yeah, I suppose. And then there comes remorse. Some of that's the alcohol, I suppose. But it's, Russell would say, live it up. But then religion tells you, oh no, that's wrong. You should be, you should live a life of quietude and modesty, contemplating the eternal verities, trying to, help your neighbor, and maybe you can enjoy your food a little bit, but not too much. Wine's right out. Sex for procreation, and Russell was raised in a kind of a puritanical Christian home, so he has kind of an axe to grind. But you can see how like living an austere religious life kind of takes some of the oomph out of like your joie de vivre, right? Your joy of life. But Russell's not totally down on religion, so he also talks about the best part of religion. He says really, this idea of the God of love and of justice and mercy, those are pretty good things. Those are lofty ideals, but they're not really. There is no real God of love. But this is kind of a projection of human beings' greatest longings and greatest ideals and aspirations. And those things are good. And what human beings do, according to Russell, is they kind of project out these things that they wish for, that they hope for, that they would like to be. In this kind of a fantasy of a loving Heavenly Father. And the ideal of love and perfect justice, he thinks those are great. They come from the human imagination. And they're okay, just, those, he thinks those things are actually really good, but they come with this other bad stuff. So religion, according to Russell, is kind of a mixed bag. But it's sort of this cruel joke. And in the text, he imagines God sort of putting on this play. And can I borrow somebody's book for just a second? I didn't have time to stop by my office. He starts out with this kind of cosmic play here. Let's see. This is the very first part of the essay. This is his. This is sort of Russell's alternative creation story. This is his alternative to Genesis 1. For countless ages, the hot nebula whirled aimlessly through space. At length, it began to take shape. The central mass threw off planets. The planets cooled. Boiling seas and burning mountains heaved and tossed from black masses of hot cloud sheets of rain, deluged the barely solid crust. And now the first germ of life grew in the depths of the ocean and developed rapidly in the fructifying warmth into vast forest trees, huge ferns springing from the damp mold, sea monsters breeding, fighting, devouring, passing away. And from the monsters, as the play unfolded itself, man was born, with the power of thought, the power of good and evil, and the cruel thirst for worship. And man saw all that is passing in this mad, monstrous world that is struggling to snatch at any cost a few brief moments of life before death's inexorable decree. And man said, there is a hidden purpose. Could we but fathom it, and the purpose is good. For we must reverence something in the visible world. In the visible world, there is nothing worth reverence. And man stood aside from the struggle, resolving that God intended harmony to come out of chaos by human efforts. And when he followed the instincts which God had transmitted to him from his ancestry of beasts of prey, He called it sin and asked God to forgive him. But then he doubted whether he could be justly forgiven until he invented a divine plan by which God's wrath was to be appeased. And seeing the present was bad, he made it yet worse, that thereby the future might be better. And he gave God thanks for the false and untamed human passion. He gave God thanks for the strength that enabled him to forgo even the joys that were possible. And God smiled when he saw that man had become perfect in renunciation and worship. He sent another sun to the sky, which crashed into man's sun and returned all again to the nebula. Yes, he murmured, it was a good play. I will have it performed again. So, what are your thoughts on that? What do you think about Russell and his pitch about the human condition? And I suppose religion too, and religious aspirations. Too cynical? Yeah, he makes God seem sort of. I think that maybe I'll pitch this he sums this up afterwards. He says, "Such an outline, but even more purposeless, more void of meaning, is a world which science presents for our belief." So he says, if you look at kind of the world in an objective sense, and you see, creatures eating other creatures. You see, great immense stars and suns and astronomical bodies whirling around in empty space. And you see this little blue dot, the Earth, and you see it teeming with life and life struggling for existence, and human beings doing that. And then human beings developing a certain kind of consciousness where they're able to improve their lives. But they also create religion. And they create religion, and the religion actually tells them to deny the bestial ancestry from which they came, their basic drives, and to renounce them for some spiritual purpose for this better world they think they're going to. But the end is going to be death for everyone, and eventually for all humanity. So it's sort of, I think Russell might pitch it as a cosmic joke, that life is a cosmic joke. And this bit about God murmuring he wants to see the whole thing performed again, it's kind of a literary device, but Russell doesn't really believe in God. But he sort of imagines the sort of being who would create the world that we see around us, a world of purposelessness, of meaninglessness. The world that objective science presents to us. So thoughts on that? Thanks. Is that the world that objectively sort of the world that we see around us? Is that like an accurate portrayal of the human response to the meaningless world? And Russell has his own kind of fix for the human condition. But one question is is that in fact though, how things are? Any thoughts on that? Maybe I should ask another question. Is Russell making anybody angry? Maybe I'll take a straw poll. How many people more or less agree with Russell? Okay, how many people disagree with Russell? Okay, there's a few, all right. And there's probably some people in the middle too, maybe. So if you disagree with Russell, what in particular of his dramatic play that he recites about about religion, or about this kind of let's see. The pitiless universe blind to human suffering. it seems like, I don't know, I think about, like every once in a while you read about like some hiker, right? And they find their body in the woods. And maybe you might think about that hiker at the end of their life, probably, maybe they fall off a cliff or something like that, and they're at the bottom with a broken leg, and it's getting cold, and they're shivering, but they have, every time they try to move, they have a shooting pain in their leg, and they're hoping for the help that will never come, and eventually they die of exposure or thirst or something like that. And you think that person probably crying out to God for help or aid or something, but no human beings, they're unable to find the person. No angels come to deliver that person, and they just expire. And you think stuff like that happens every day. People get into car accidents, people slip in the bathtub and die, people get cancer, just like all the different things that happen to people. And it seems like the universe doesn't really care. And in fact, there's like, this room right now is teeming with bacteria. Maybe not as much as in some other places, but it's teeming with bacteria that would like nothing better than to eat you for lunch. And within minutes of your assuming room temperature, they're at you and they're going to be eating you and decomposing you. And then after we put you in the pine box, the worms are going to come in there. And even if you're embalmed, it's all going to go turn to goo eventually. And I noticed outside it was getting kind of cold again, and I'm putting on my gloves because my hands are starting to feel numb. And you think about like man, naked and unprotected by modern clothing, by climate-controlled systems inside. It's pretty harsh out there. And I don't know if you've ever you think about like the homeless people. If you've ever been homeless, or if you've ever been camping, it's sort of a reminder of how rough the elements are. Even like I remember I was at a camp thing, and we were supposed to have running water, and the running water ran out. So then we're stuck with, okay, what do we do? And there was a problem with the pipes. And so there was like this brackish pond that some people bathed in. I'm like, oh, I don't think I want to do that. You get that. There's that, what is that called? There's like this like pond scum, like protozoa, or like I forget what it is. It's some sort of a parasite that you get in water, and they tell you every once in a while, they tell you you're not supposed to go in the water because this parasite will get into your brain and again start eating you, right? There are all these hostile, there's snakes and spiders and things that all want to eat you and kill you, or if they see you, they're going to be afraid of you and bite you. So is that the sort of that seems like it's a hostile universe. Like if you imagine you take like a friend of mine just had a baby, right? You take a newborn baby, and you just put it outside and just sit there for a while. It's not going to last long, right? It's not like the universe takes care of little babies. People have to take care of little babies. And it's not like the universe provides you with food. Yeah, if you've ever, anybody here grow up on a farm? Ever work on a farm? Yeah. So is it pretty easy work, or what do you think?
No, it's hard work.
Yeah. So it's like you work. Usually in agriculture, you get up early in the morning and you're just plowing the earth, trying to get rid of the weeds. What kind of stuff did you do? Like, did you plow and plant, or?
Feed, clean, pluck hay, clean the animals' pen.
Yeah, you're raising animals too. You got to take care of them, and the animals. It's not like the animals just sort of wander around, all the time. They have you have to have a barn for them to be in the wintertime in harsh climates. So it's like all the you look at human beings from hunter-gatherers to the Industrial Revolution. It's like these different steps to making our lives more and more pleasant. And agriculture was a big thing. And agriculture, the advantage of it is it gives you a fairly reliable food source. So unlike hunting and gathering, if the animal that you eat ends up dying off by some plague, or there's a new predator or what have you, or the climate changes and they're not around anymore. You might, and hunting's a hard work too, if you've ever been hunting. And it's one thing with a nice rifle, but you're trying to do it with like a bow and arrow, or a sling, it's even harder there. Or a trap of some kind. It's, and you think about it, that's not, it doesn't seem, it seems like a very hostile world. Although with all the modern conveniences we have around us, it maybe doesn't seem that hostile. You ever watch, there's that show where they take people and plunk them out in the middle of nowhere, with no clothes on, and just say, survive. Is it called Survivor? That's the other show.
They have clothes.
What's it called?
Naked and Afraid.
Naked and Afraid.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great title. I mean, that's the real situation you're in. It's only because you've been coddled by growing up in a first world country that maybe you don't have an appreciation for that. So what is it that Russell says that sort of, is there anything that he says that seems off or exaggerated or seems to go beyond what science says? He says, this is the world that science presents to us, a cold and unfeeling universe, blind to human suffering. The universe doesn't care about you. And then on top of that, he has this thing about, and maybe this is the controversial part, that religion makes you despise your life and feel guilty about what few pleasures you can eke out in this life. Russell kind of practiced what he preached, and he is not his personal life. I think he is known as a seducer of women, and was spent most of his life trying to fight against the puritanical values of his family. Yeah.
The world is billions and billions of years old, but science just gave a few thousand of years. That's why I don't agree with him. But science barely came. The world existed before science.
Yeah, that's certainly true. Science, I guess he would say that if you look at the world empirically, based on observations of the senses, and you look at it objectively and rationally, you see a universe that's hostile to human life. One, again, teemed with predators and disease and extremes of climate, and where human beings have to band together and work together to eke out an existence. And it's only by sort of building generation upon generation for thousands and thousands of years that we're able to come up with civilization, roughly from maybe, 10,000, say, maybe 8,000 BC, the advent of agriculture, to, 4,000 BC, the first kind of urban civilizations, and, and then forward to Industrial Revolution in the 19th century. And those, there are these milestones where human beings are developing faster and faster, but those are things that humanity came up with. It's not like God put us in an Edenic paradise to, just eat fruit off the trees and sit around. There's a few places in the world people got really lucky, the Polynesian Islands, I think. You had missionaries coming to some of these areas in the Enlightenment period, I think, and they found the natives, and they thought this was terrible. These people walking around with no clothes on, laying around in the sun all day, enjoying life, picking fruit off the trees. Every once in a while, they'd have a wild boar hunt, and then they'd have a big feast, and then they'd gorge themselves and fall asleep in a total gluttonous frenzy. And alcohol too, I think, served, and wake up, the next morning, and do it all over again, and the rest of the time just sort of hang out, go swimming, maybe make a few things here or there, make some more, arrowheads for the boar hunt or a spear, But it's like a very different from Europe, where the climate, is harsher and where you really have to work to survive. But there's very few places like that. So so it doesn't. I suppose he's presupposing that the afterlife doesn't exist. But do you think that's true? That if you think that heaven awaits, is that going to make you a little more, less enthusiastic about your life right now? Because you're thinking about how great heaven's going to be. Or how about sin consciousness? Let's take that. So Donald Trump is like, he's on the stump. It's hard, I keep on going back to politics. It's in the news. I don't know how many people here are following the primary elections. More than half. All right. So
Who's winning so far?
huh?
Who's winning so far?
So Trump is up, Cruz is gaining, Rubio is doing a little better, and the GOP side. Carson finally bowed out, so now it's Trump, Cruz, and Rubio, with Cruz actually gaining ground, but Trump's still way out ahead, way out front. And one of the things that Trump said, and then the Hillary Bernie thing, Bernie's kind of hanging in there. He's not doing terribly, but he's not grabbing a lot of delegates, and the Democrats have their super delegate shenanigans, and so it's not really a thing of the paradoxically the party that says it's for the little guy, they have all this party machinery that squeezes out the little guy. Maybe in the opinion polls, I think they're pretty much neck and neck, but the delegate count, Hillary's still way ahead. I saw the Bernie supporters are there in the cafeteria again today, so very popular with young people. Anyway, so what this reminded me of something Trump said. He said he was asked if he felt like he needed to ask forgiveness. He's like, I don't feel like I have to forgive for this. I just don't do wrong things. And it's like, and that's just like blasphemy to the evangelical vote. But still, he's picking up the majority, even though, it's Cruz guy's hard religious right, very religious, Christian fundamentalist. And Trump's just saying, well, I don't really feel like I need forgiveness. I just go and try to do the right thing.
Has he even answered that question on any of the commandments?
Oh, he says in one interview he was talking about what a strong Christian he was. So, but he's like a moderate Presbyterian. That's one of the reasons why he's appealed to swing voters, because they look at Cruz and are like, okay, that's more like sort of religious right stuff, and on social issues, Trump's very moderate on a lot of them. So, but anyway, what I wanted to hit on was this thing where he says, I don't feel like I need to ask for forgiveness. I just try to do the right thing. And I think if you look at Christianity as a religion, that's seen as that's blasphemous, or it's a direct contradiction of the teaching of the New Testament, which says that human beings are constantly sinning, and that's why they're in need of a savior, and that's why Jesus died on the cross, because everyone's a sinner. Everyone's falls short of God's glory, and need to ask God for forgiveness for their sins. Like the Lord's Prayer, right? Lead us not in temptation, to deliver us from evil. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. So the idea is that you're constantly in need of forgiveness for all the bad things you do. Sins of omission, sins of commission, right? There's the things that you do that are bad, and there's the things that you didn't do that you should have done. Those are bad too. And you look at the teachings. I think there's other religions are like this too. So and in some ways, you look at, say, the Hindu culture. In India, they're actually a lot, in some ways, more puritanical about things like sex than they are in America, in Hinduism. Islam, I think, the same way. So Russell's singling out Christianity because he's from Britain, and it's a Christian culture. But what do you think about this sort of the sin and salvation ideology, if you don't like the word mythology, but this idea that you're constantly doing bad things, that your natural drives and urges are going to lead you to a bad place, that you need to keep careful control over your desires for food, because that can lead to gluttony, your desires for wine, that can lead to drunkenness, your desires for sex leads to promiscuity, and, you know, sex for procreation or within the proper bounds of matrimony, you know, homosexuality right out, you know, taking a walk on the wild side in whatever form that may take, right out. Is that kind of something, does he have a point about this sort of robbing people of what enjoyment they might have in life? Assuming that there isn't a God. Yeah.
Well, saying that humans wanting to do what comes natural is like saying they're, out of all the other species in the world, unnatural. There's some flaw in their basic design.
Well, I get, maybe he's talking about there's like this we have these natural drives which come from our evolutionary history. Like, yeah, we coming from hominids, and
we should be different now.
well, we've developed this sort of idea that as human beings' minds have developed, that we've developed the idea that those drives are bad and wrong, or at least that need to be kept under careful control. And there, I think that and again, Russell's writing at a different time where I think there's more of this guilt, like I don't know, like people like this used to be a thing when you were raised Catholic, and now post-Vatican II, there's not as much as the Catholic guilt. But I've talked to people, and they'd say things like yeah, I was raised Catholic. Like, I walk by the mirror and I like see myself, and like I feel naked and ashamed. And it's like that thing in the Bible where it talks about, you know, how Adam took the fig leaf. And I'm like, oh, you know, and I don't like having mirrors around because I don't like seeing myself unclothed, because I feel dirty and bad. Right, and that's part of that sort of idea that you know, the human body, like former Attorney General John Ashcroft, he's like he's he's a religious fundamentalist, and there's like a nude statue in the White House, and he had like a drapery put over the statue because he didn't like it being there in his like press conferences. He thought it was immodest, right? And you think about having those kinds of hang-ups, they kind of put a cramp in your style and keep you from enjoying life. So, I don't know, let's move on a little bit here. So what's Russell's prescription? Well, one of the things he says is you should avoid despair. So he talks about the religion of Moloch, the cringing submission of a slave to a cruel and capricious universe. So Moloch is this Canaanite god, and people would sacrifice their firstborn to it, and it was set up like either an oven or like a giant frying pan, and you'd take your firstborn child and you'd like throw it into the skillet. You know, they'd like inside the statue there'd be a bunch of coals, so it'd get the pan red hot, and you basically barbecue your baby alive. And he says people didn't do it because they loved Moloch or because they respected Moloch. It was because they feared Moloch. And they feared retribution from this god if they didn't give them their firstborn. So people did it. This is one of the things the Israelites stamped out. So now they stamped that out through a genocidal campaign of war, but they did stamp out this idea of child sacrifice, even though it's sort of not completely. Even the Israelites would sacrifice to Moloch against God's orders. So, but he talks about having that attitude towards life of being afraid and waiting for the other shoe to drop. And I'm not sure what the analog with sacrifice would be, but it's kind of this idea of resigning yourself to the fact that the universe sucks and it's trying to kill you, and just giving up. And Russell says, don't give up. Even though the universe is a terrible place and it doesn't give a damn about you, don't give in. And so he says you should have a certain sense of idealism and courage. And those are the things that you need to face life with. So even though suffering and a meaningless universe is sort of a thing that might drive you to despair. You need to resist the impulse to fall into despair and have some ideals. Like again, the ideals that he sees are represented in religion in a certain form. And he says you should have courage in facing. So this idea of facing all the universe throws at you. So his idea is you sort of wave your fist in the air and say, meaningless universe, you're not gonna get a hold of me, and you're not gonna make me submit. I will not submit.
And then bolt of lightning. Probably should have been waving around the umbrella.
I haven't seen one of those unless it's, if you wave, I wouldn't wave a golf club in God's direction, because then it makes his job really easy. And then he says you should have sympathy for your fellow human beings who are in the same boat as you. So he thinks all these things sort of come from, think about like what set of values is appropriate in a universe devoid of meaning and full of suffering. And then, well, courage, hope, hanging together, and then also accepting the fact that you're going to die. So you need to don't let it worry you, don't let it bother you. Just accept that it's going to happen, it's inevitable, and don't try to push against it or rage against it. There's a poem that reads, "Do not go gentle into that good night, but rage against the dying of the light." Who is that? Anybody know that poem? Dylan Thomas, yeah.
He wrote it about his father dying.
Right, yeah. And I think Russell would say, well, you want to rage against the universe and suffering and despair, but death is something that you're going to have to just face. And then he says, refuse to give in to fear, refuse to give in to despair, and nihilism. Nihilism is believing in nothing. So even though the universe is meaningless and it has no meaning, it doesn't mean that you have to believe in nothing. You can still believe in something. You can still have lofty ideals. You can still have values, but they come from within you. They're not coming from outside you in the universe in terms of God's plan for your life or a kind of an ultimate being or a cosmic scheme. It's all has to do with you and the values which are going to help you face life's inevitabilities. So and Russell presents this as kind of a rational response. This is like what the humanist or the atheist, how they should face life. And it's a rational response, and it's the best response that we have given our circumstances. So, but do you agree with Russell? Do these values sort of naturally come from this response? Do they naturally come from the situation we're in? Is that sort of our best bet?
Feels like it.
What's that?
Feels like it. I'm agreeing with what's up there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like either way, if you have religion or you're atheist, those things are stuff you need to, or good to have. Acceptance is, once you get over the fear of death, then you can start living. Like people contemplate their mortality
Yeah.
their whole life, and it's the same as fearing like all-knowing God's going to punish you, just fearing your mortality and not doing stuff because you're like, oh, I'm going to get one life, better not mess this up.
YOLO.
They have like the black box where they replay stuff. That's like the last minutes of like the cockpit in the airplane that's going down. And it's interesting that often we'll hear like, usually it's some expletive, but like the pilot will realize that all is lost, there's nothing left you can do, and you just hear at the end, you hear this, oh crap, And then it's like, oh, well, what am I gonna do? And I think Russell would say, just have that attitude now, because, you know, there's nothing you can do about it. Maybe transhumanism has the answer. Maybe death isn't inevitable. There's always the Kranich, right? Okay, well, think on these things, and after the break, we'll come back and talk about Tolstoy. Okay. And any thoughts come to you during the break about this whole, the response to a meaningless universe? Or criticisms of Russell? I'll try to stoke the fires here a little bit more. So,
It seems like the only response, because the only other choice is just give up.
yeah, I suppose you give up or not give up.
I remember something, I guess it was from a video game, but character said the only thing you have right to when you're born is the dirt. And everything is struggle or something along those lines. The first line is right, I'm paraphrasing the rest.
The only thing you have a right to is the dirt?
Yep.
Because that's sort of where you came from and where you're going, or?
Just everything you are allowed to be the dirt. You gotta
Mm.
claw your way up. Earn every little bit you get.
Yeah, I like that better than, it's another similar one that,
If you
I
play
think
the
it's an old Chinese proverb, they displayed at the beginning of Ron, which is, it's like, is it Macbeth or is it?
King Lear,
King Lear. It's King Lear in feudal Japan.
great movie.
Yeah, and at the beginning, there's a proverb, I think it's a proverb, and it says, man is born crying and doesn't stop until he dies. There's a cheery thought. Put that on an inspirational
Well,
gift
they
card.
know. We are kind of whiny.
Well, the idea is that you're born in suffering, and your life is filled with suffering, and you die. And so either you accept it, and I guess that there's more than just acceptance. So there's a kind of an attitude. You know, Russell says that you have to sort of fight against despair and fear, because those are bad things, and have courage and a certain amount of idealism, and find support from other people. But is that really rational, or is that just, are you still in denial? Because he wants to tell you to accept the fact that you're going to die someday, and that your life is going to be full of suffering. But he also wants you to be cheery about it. Is it kind of like whistling by a graveyard, or does it make sense to whistle a happy tune when life is miserable?
Spite the universe.
It almost seems like he's what's the word? Personalizing the universe, right? Russell doesn't believe in a God, but he's kind of shaking his fist at this personified universe, saying, "You're not going to get me down. I'm going to live my life, and by golly, it's going to be the best life possible for me, given the circumstances." Also sympathy, like maybe it should be, somebody like Nietzsche would say, sympathy's bad. Sympathy is just going to bring you down. And so if you see like some, on a homeless person on a street corner with a sign, don't stop to try to help him. Like, just keep on driving by, and they'll give him a second thought. Because the whole idea of going around trying to help people, that's a Christian idea. That's the whole guilt and sin and salvation and going around helping people. What you should try to do is kind of focus on yourself and try to eke out the best existence possible for you. So one criticism of Russell, you might say, sympathy for other people because they're in the same boat as you seems kind of iffy as like an objective reaction or a rational reaction. I suppose you might feel sorry for people, but that's not the same as sympathy. And if you sympathize with other people's sufferings, it seems like you might magnify your own. If you start thinking about all the suffering people, all the homeless people out there in the rain with their signs, and their dogs who are unfortunate enough to be hitched to a vagrant or a vagabond instead of having like a nice warm comfy house to be in. if you think about that stuff long enough, you're going to get depressed. I suppose that, so one reaction might be this, that it's kind of, it's trying to gin up certain kinds of feelings that are positive, but are those feelings really a rational reaction to the universe that we find ourselves in? Maybe the rational reaction is, fear and worried about the other shoe dropping, right? Maybe it's rational to be afraid. What's that?
Humanity likes a challenge.
Or maybe,
by now.
maybe it's just personality. Maybe there's no rational reaction. Maybe it's like, well, you can do it this way, you can do it that way. And it's all pointless anyway, so whichever you choose, it's not gonna, it might make you a little happier, I suppose. Maybe if you face life with idealism, courage, and sympathy, maybe you'd be more unhappy. Maybe if like the pessimist, so Russell seems to be given a kind of an optimist approach, but the thing about the pessimist is, they never get their hopes up. It's like there was a joke ad spot on Mad TV for a dating service called Lowered Expectations, and the idea is that don't get your hopes up. You're a wallflower, and the best you can do is someone who's probably a lot more pathetic than you. And they have these, joke dating profiles. But the idea, lowered expectations is that you don't get your hopes up, and then you don't get disappointed. So maybe that would just be as rational strategy.
You can still be disappointed if your hopes aren't up. Things could be worse than you
I suppose, yeah. So maybe just keep on lowering the bar.
Get rid of
Wow.
the bar entirely.
Just think about, well, I didn't get cancer today, or nothing especially bad happened to me. Think about if you're expecting bad things to happen every day, and then they don't. One day they don't. You're like, oh, okay, I'm doing pretty well. Whereas
The
if
bird
you're
groups on you.
if you're hoping for like the best in life, then you're probably going to be disappointed. You'll be pleasantly surprised when things go right. And maybe realism is sort of the rational reaction in the middle, but maybe not the strategy to make you happiest. There are like two different strategies, right? One is be an optimist and face life with courage, even though maybe it's not warranted, and try to gin up a bunch of optimism and feel good about life, even though there's a lot in life to feel bad about. And the other thing is to notice how bad life really is, to accept it, and then to say, well, I don't expect much out of life, so when things go your way, you're like, oh, I'm kind of happy today because nothing really bad happened. And maybe those aren't even, they're strategies for being happy, but maybe they aren't even rational or irrational, or one's more appropriate than the other. They're just strategies for reacting to life. The optimist and the pessimist and the realist, and all have their pros and cons. I suppose in this acceptance of death again, well, how about this? You can hedge your bets against suffering, right? So maybe there are lots of things you can do to live a long, happy life, and maybe focus on those things. And you might get unlucky, and you might get some genetically inherited disease, but you think about it, it's not like, oh, I'm going to suffer and die, so why bother, trying? Well, you can, or like I saw a bumper sticker, eat healthy, exercise, die anyway, right? But there's like a slow lingering death of the diabetes and cancer and so on, and then there's like dying quietly in your sleep. Like my grandfather, not screaming and yelling like his passengers. So, but right, you die. I've known people they get up to their 90s and they die quietly in their sleep. I'm not sure what the deal was with Nancy Reagan. Like she recently died. She was 94, something like that. I don't know if she had a long illness beforehand or not, but a lot of people, they live to a healthy old age and die quietly in their sleep. And so, you'd be like my grandfather, who was a smoker all his life, and died of lung cancer and emphysema in hospital. Yeah, I think in his late 50s maybe. Or you could be like my grandfather, who's a vegetarian and took care of himself and died in his, I think, mid-90s in a rest home. He got the Alzheimer's though, so you never know when you're going to get something that's going to cause something that maybe you can't anticipate. But the idea is you can hedge your bets and hope for the best, and maybe that's the way to go. And I suppose there's something to be said. Well, it seems like there's a lot of research in happiness studies. If you're thinking about like having a happy life, that says the optimism seems to work pretty well. And so if you're just like a little bit optimistic and you're not just sort of pie in the sky, unrealistic about how things are going to go, but you expect a little better than is warranted, you tend to do better. You tend to have more courage, you tend to try more things. And people that challenge themselves and grow and tend to have happier lives. But then, what good is happiness? It can't buy you money. Why would you want to be happy? Let's get to this meaning of life. Like, it seems like an absurd question, right? But why is happiness even valuable? It's just as meaningless as anything else. If life's a cosmic joke, why is it appropriate to laugh? So maybe that's, I don't know, maybe that's too existential. But maybe happiness is all you got. If you can't have a meaningful life, maybe you can have a happy life. And maybe that means like, doing things like having lots of friends, taking care of your health, and then maybe this is kind of Aristotle's version of the meaningful life. Have good relationships, find some meaningful work. I suppose meaningful in the sense that it actualizing your innate potentials, and have good relationships and be part of a community, and maybe that's all you need to be happy. So Tolstoy gives a kind of an opposite, or he offers a counterpoint to Russell, or kind of an opposite view, I suppose you could say. So Tolstoy's Confession is interesting because it's around the same time. He's writing within 20 years of Russell. And he's living at a time where people are bullish on progress and science is taking off and human beings are discovering things like antiseptic surgery and there's all sorts of new machines to make things. The steam engine is sort of the height of the revolution, and there's mass manufacturing and all kinds of consumer goods being produced. Lots of exploration and colonization. Standards of living are going way up. And so Tolstoy, as a young man, agreed with Russell on this idea of the purposeless universe. And he says, everybody around him was talking about progress and how great it was to be progressive and to believe in progress, because it's all human beings. Life is getting better and better. Human beings are progressing, but he said, well, progressing towards what? And when he'd ask people like, well, okay, you say you believe in progress, but what are we headed towards? And they're like, more discoveries, more inventions. Like, so what's the point of that? And so he starts to lose faith in this concept of progress. He thinks it's kind of an empty shell. And he sees belief and faith in science as being a modern superstition. So then he sort of moves on and thinks, well, okay, I'm going to figure out this meaning of life thing. Here's what science says. Science says, I still did that, didn't I? I have the typo I have to fix. This should say causal, not casual. Hey man, I'm just a cohesion of particles. Hanging loose, but cohesing. Can you make a verb out of cohesion? What is the verb form of cohesion? Cohese?
Cohesiting.
So anyway, science tells you you're a transitory causal cohesion of particles. So you're just a collection of atoms and molecules stuck together a certain way. Someday you'll fall apart. He uses the metaphor of you being like like bread baking. He says you're a little lump of dough, and the dough is heated, it ferments, and it calls its fermenting life. But someday there'll be an end to the fermenting and to all the questions that, I think he has the lump of dough asks itself, like, what am I? Why am I this? And it says someday there'll be end of the fermenting, end of all the questions. So you're born, at a certain point you think, how did I get here? Who am I, and what's life all about? And then you think about those questions until the day you die, and when you die, all your questions go away. And I think Tolstoy's favorite metaphor is this old Asian fable. So he has, in this fable, there's a man being chased by a wild beast, like a lion or tiger or something, right? And then he's chased over a cliff, and he grabs this branch, and he's hanging over a chasm. At the bottom of or chasm, I guess. At the bottom of the chasm, there's a dragon with its mouth open, waiting for him to drop into it, so he can eat him. And at the top, of course, if he crawls out of the chasm, there's this wild beast that's going to eat him alive. So either he can let go and fall into the mouth of the dragon and be eaten alive, or he can try to crawl out of the chasm and face the wild beast who's going to try to eat him alive. And in the meantime, there are mice eating away at the branch that he's holding on to. So if he does nothing, he's also going to fall into the mouth of the dragon and die. So, any way he turns, no matter what he does, he's going to die. He's going to be eaten alive. And this is seen as a metaphor for the inevitability of death. And it's like there's nothing you can do about it. You can run, but you can't. Any way you go, you're going to be dead.
Take the dragon. Punch it in the face.
Yeah, I think that's Russell. What would Russell say? Russell would say, fight against that wild beast. Russell would probably say your best chances with the wild beast, and even if you know that you're going to be eaten alive, you should put up a good fight.
Knock the little rats off and hope that the beast and the dragon will go away.
There you go, yeah. Take the mice and grab their tails and fling them up there and try to distract the wild beast and then run off. So Tolstoy says, through these different stages in life, he found meaning. First of all, he tried to find meaning and pleasure. And he was kind of a delinquent. He'd go around he's a kind of spoiled part of the intelligentsia. So his family had money. He'd go out and drink and gamble and carouse and cohabit with young women. Cohabit's not the right word. Fornicate, there you go. A nice old-timey word. And then later on he settled down and got married and had a family, and that was his life for a while. And then finally his writing career took off, and his career was really big, and maybe I should put career there as well as fame. So he was a career man, and writing was his thing, and he wrote a bunch of famous books, War and Peace being one of them. Anna Karenina, another one. At one time, probably the most famous, famous man in Russia, maybe. Certainly the most famous writer. And then he tried to find meaning in wealth. So he made a lot of money from his books. And at a certain point, he kind of went, I would say, well, here's to get the wealth and achievement. So those things are also seen as sort of caught up with his art. he made a lot of money, and then he's proud of his accomplishment. Like I wrote War and Peace. It's like this really, really, really long book, and also celebrated. I had a friend, she went as War and Peace and Halloween. We had to read it in high school. It's just this big old giant book with little armholes, right? So, and then finally, this idea of finding meaning in art. So he thought being an artist, being a writer, being a novelist is where it's at. And so he had it all. He had wealth, he had fame, he had a wonderful family. And then he started having a nervous breakdown. So he should have been happy. So he has this existential crisis. So he lies awake at night wondering what the whole point of it all is. He can't sleep, he can't eat. He falls into this deep, dark depression, and he becomes suicidal. And you think, that seems, I look at that and I think, that seems kind of nuts. But his whole point was like he had everything that he ever wanted, and he was wondering, well, what's the point of it all? I've accomplished all I set out to accomplish. There's nothing more to conquer or to do or to. He ends up, and he's not really sure why. And it's not like he thinks, oh, I've done everything that I set out to do. He just feels empty inside, even after accomplishing all these things, having all these wonderful things. He's got all the things that people strive for, and he's not happy. And it's not only he's not happy, but he's completely miserable, and he feels so bad about himself that he wants to kill himself. So then he's trying to figure out, okay, what's the point of it all? And he figures out the reason I'm so depressed is that I can't figure out like what's the point of life. He lies awake at night wondering like, well, what then? What's next? What's it all about? And so he studies science, he studies the writings of sages and philosophers, and he mentions Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, and he goes around like to priests and clerics and asks them a bunch of questions. And tries to figure it out, and only gets so far. And one of the things he says he notes, though, is that, who are the happy people? It's the peasants, like the people that get up early in the morning, do a hard hard day's work, live a simple life, and then who is the miserable people? Well, people from his own class, the intellectuals, right? You look at college professors, they're all, nuts. They have, the neuroses of various kinds, depressed, cynical, right? So, his intellectual friends are like that. They're, drinking problem, neurotic, cynical, and kind of depressed all the time. And so he thinks that maybe it's his wealth and status is getting in his way of really enjoying life. And finally, he noticed that it's not just sort of the hard day's work, but it's the life of faith. And that these peasants have this life that they lead where it's hard work and faith in God. And that's really where it's at. So, and he has this handle analogy, and this sort of maybe just get to this last point here. I should probably reverse these two things here. So he concludes that the meaning in life is to be found in the faith of his childhood. So he kind of comes full circle. He talks about when he was a kid, he was raised in the church, he believed in God, and his mother, raised him to have faith, but then he walked away from it as a young man, and then went through this long arc of being a kind of a delinquent and a wastrel, which is a person that goes around squandering their money that they inherited, and then settling down, being a family man, a career man, becoming rich and famous, wondering what the point of it all is, and then he comes back full circle to this life of faith that he had as a young man. And he says it's the simple childhood faith and the hope of eternal life that really give your life meaning right now. And the problem with wealth and status is they tend to get in the way of those things. So Jesus said you can't serve both God and money. And it's easier for a rich man to get into heaven than it is for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. Right, so he concludes that it's his wealth and his cynicism and his intellectualism that were making him miserable. And really what he should do is embrace the simple life of faith and of, sort of the life on a farm. And Tolstoy actually, he did a few things that I think made his family somewhat unhappy. He gave up all his copyrights. Before that, I think he became a vegetarian. And in one incident, began raging in the middle of dinner and took the roast and went in the backyard and gave it a proper burial. And then he gave up the right to all his copyrights, and so his family didn't have all his money coming in anymore. And then he went out and lived on a farm and played with children for his retirement. And then he was happy. So, and he has this handle analogy. So he says, imagine there's a place you go in and it's like a tavern, and they have food and drink there, and the proprietor greets you at the door and says, you can have whatever you want from our table, eat as much as you want, stay as long as you like. You just got to turn this handle over there by the door, right? And you think, and so he says, most people, like if you're like a normal person, you'd say, really? I just turn the handle and you give me whatever I want? And the guy says, yeah. Oh, okay. You go over there, crank, 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 crank. Is that good enough? Oh, a little more. Okay, crank, 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 crank. Okay, that's good. Come and have something to eat. And maybe you go back for seconds, crank the handle some more or something, right? So, but he says, you look at your cynic, your intellectual, the people that he was around all the time, they're like, why do I gotta crank the handle? And that's just the rules, right? I'm like, I'm not gonna crank that handle until you tell me what that's for. What does that lead to, right? And so the cynic isn't gonna crank the handle until they find out what it's for. And the intellectual always wants to know why. And they don't do the things that are gonna make them happy. They want an explanation. They want to know the answers, the mysteries of life. They're like the philosopher, right? Who's never, and then even if you give them the answer, probably never satisfied. And then he says, well, what if this handle actually cranked the water? It was a handle, went to a well, to a pump that cranked a pump that pumped water for the tavern, and maybe irrigated the crops and gave you drinking water inside. And that's the reason why he did it. So there's a reason for doing it. It's just the proprietor's not going to tell you. Well, crank the handle anyway and don't worry about why. And so he thinks faith is like that. Faith is like a handle you crank, but you don't really know why. You just know that it works. And so the end of all his questions and all his philosophical conundrums was a simple life of faith, hard work, and again, having good relationships, being part of a community, right? But at its basis, this is faith. And faith means setting aside your intellectual doubts and your cynicism, and maybe giving up the trappings of wealth and status. And as Jesus said, also said, unless you become as a little child, you cannot enter the kingdom of God. And the intellectual is never going to become like a little child. He's going to see religion as silly and stupid, and for children and old women, which is kind of the attitude people have towards the church in Russia today, and most of Europe, or a lot of Europe, I should say. Particularly, you look at Eastern Europe and some degree Western Europe, largely secular and atheistic, and people are very cynical about religion. But Tolstoy is the Orthodox, it's the Russian Orthodox Church. And Tolstoy said that faith is really what gives life meaning. And having faith of necessity means putting aside your intellectual doubts and your cynicism. So thoughts on that? I think I'm being a little repetitive. So if you had to pick one, who do you like better, Tolstoy or Russell? Yeah, I'll start with that. Who would vote for Russell? Okay, who would vote for Tolstoy? Okay, one vote for Tolstoy. I don't know, is there a middle ground here, or so what, the people who like Russell, what do you like about him?
I like that he thinks you should behave well no matter what.
So like, no matter what happens to you, you should face life with courage and a sense of values and idealism.
Try and bring out the best in people, and they, in the face of nothingness.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of inspirational, right? A free man's worship. And this idea is what should a free man, a free thinker, a person who's a skeptic, not religious, what's he going to do? Well, it's not like you go, okay, well, I guess I have no hope for eternal life, so I might as well just like lie down and die right now. Maybe I'll just like crawl into a coffin and you can just shovel some dirt on me. What's that?
That's a giving up.
Yeah. So, and he says, you don't have to give up. You can still fight the good fight, against fear and adversity, and face it with courage, and keep a stiff upper lip, and help your fellow travelers along the way. How about Tolstoy? What do people like about Tolstoy?
I just think that Russell's kind of just cynical, just to think that there's no meaning to life. And maybe there isn't, but I don't really like to look at it like that.
You
feel
give
like
it meaning.
The world's so complex and everything on it is so complex, I feel like there has to be some meaning for it. And so Tolstoy at least has a meaning. I'm not saying I believe that that's the reason our faith is what the meaning of life is for, but I feel like there has to be something. So I believe in more a middle ground between the two.
Mm-hmm. Maybe some, like a faith in sort of a larger plan for life, even if it doesn't sort of match up with Tolstoy's. Makes sense. Tolstoy is interesting too because he's a Christian anarchist. So, and usually people don't think about those two things going together. But Jesus was sort of apolitical. This kind of weird melding of I don't know, like minimalist statism. Why it's the minimalist statism? The kind of like the weird hybrid of the religious right and classical liberals is kind of an American thing, I guess. But Tolstoy saw government as sort of the brutal use of power, and saw what the Russian government had done, and is I think underrated as a political thinker too. And when he talks about Christian anarchism, it's not a big movement, but there's actually a movement of Christian anarchists and libertarians around that think that if you really want to follow the teachings of Jesus, you can't be joined at the hip with the state. And you shouldn't be like, going back to politics, like John Kasich, who wants to sort of, spread the wealth around in the name of Jesus, or, imposes Catholic values on the American citizenry through force of law. Okay, so these are the two. Maybe you can talk more about the middle ground. What does it mean, like, for life to have a meaning? Like, people will say things like, you look around at the vastness of the universe, and the Earth is just a small little insignificant speck in the cosmic vastness of space. You have teeming galaxies and stars, and this little corner of the Earth. And when I think about that, I feel so small and insignificant. Is that like a rational thought, or is that something like is more like a feeling that this maybe isn't warranted?
Well, we're small on the large scale, but we don't work on the large scale, so.
Yeah, what if I were to
Just a little bit
say,
irrational.
when I think about all the tiny atoms and molecules and like the microphysical particles within the atom, and I think about how big and large I am, and I think about how big the Earth is in comparison with a positron, or a neutrino. And I think about the vastness of the earth and the fact that it teems with life. And I think about how big I am in comparison to the gnats and the microbes and the
They're not the
bacteria.
biggest thing,
And I
but
feel
that's
pretty
small.
big and significant. So it seems like you could go either way. And the fact that the earth is small in comparison to the rest of the universe doesn't seem like it necessarily means it's less valuable or important. But I think there's a kind of a trick of the mind where you kind of feel like that. You think about something really big, you think about something really small, and you think, oh, that small thing's not worth paying attention to.
And yet we took over the world,
Who's we?
humanity.
Okay,
We're
yeah,
everywhere.
that's true. Even Antarctica.
Whether we want to or not.
Human beings are the most adaptable and successful species, apart from the cockroach, I guess, or something. I don't know. I don't know if you count organisms. I think there's an entomologist who said that God hasn't. What do we know? He was asked, like, what do we know about God by looking at nature? And he said, well, I think we'd have to say that the divinity has an inordinate fondness for beetles. So you look at like beetles, there's lots of different, and cockroach is technically a kind
It's
of
like
a beetle.
90%
Of all organisms
animals
are beetles, yeah.
arthropods.
Yeah. So, okay, more on the meaning of life. Well, what does it mean what does it mean for life to have a meaning? Like, is it necessarily a religious idea? Is when you think about my life, say my life has meaning. What does it mean? What does it mean to have meaning?
I think it's like when they're showing Tolstoy was talking about how he had everything, money and power and fame, but he didn't have that pleasure, meaning of life, that acceptance and being happy. And it's like living in the present and just no matter all the crazy stuff going around, you're just happy and content with this little tiny little dot of space you're taking up or something.
Saint Augustine has a quote where he says, "Our hearts are ever restful till we find our rest in Thee." And the idea is that human beings have this sort of God-shaped void in their life, and they're always looking for something, they're not sure what it is. And I think Tolstoy would go along with this. He would say he sort of feels restless all the time. He tries to find meaning in all these different pursuits, and nothing really works out until he finally gets near the end of his life and has this sort of crisis and figures out what he was missing all along was the faith of his childhood. And then maybe along with the sort of renouncing all the things he chased all his life, of wealth and status. What do you think about the following argument? So, suppose when someone were to say, Tolstoy is suffering from a psychological problem, that any normal person, if they had the wealth and status and achievement of Tolstoy, they would be happy. And he is having a nervous breakdown, and this shows there's something wrong with him. And it probably may be related to the fact that he's an artist. Artists tend to be kind of temperamental types.
Well, we've seen it time after time that he kind of embodies the famous person that has all the wealth and still commits suicide or is just trying to mess up their life as much as they can because they have nothing else to live for. Like the guy that jumps out of the 40th story when Wall Street crashes because he's only going to have $100,000 left in the bank and doesn't back in the 20s, and it's like,
Wow.
Yeah,
That was a lot of money back then.
Yeah,
Before
and-
inflation.
I know, like, but like he's not gonna have the millions, so he can't live anymore because he doesn't have a million in the bank. He's gonna jump. It's just ridiculous. Like you have to. There's something about you can see it's not the. It's an inner thing that a lot of the people that do get depressed with wealth and stuff, just accumulating more wealth is never gonna be the answer. They always find it in like the polar opposite or something.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to like have wealth and fame and great achievement and to see whether I felt suicidally
Like,
depressed or
I
not.
always
Maybe
say-
not
I would
fame,
say I would
because-
never like commit suicide if you had that much money, but it's
You
don't
see
know
all
what's
these
going
stories
through
of
their
these
head,
like
but-
I always wonder about, you see like, you know, Marilyn Monroe, right? It's like the most desired and sought after woman in America, you know, when she was around, and you know, millions and millions of dollars, even got critical acclaim that she longed for. She's married to like, you know, Joe DiMaggio for a while, and Arthur Miller, you know, famous playwright, world most famous baseball player, iconic. You know, it's like a name that everybody knew. And then she's like, you know, hooked on pills and booze and can't sleep at night and suffers from depression. And people will point to her and like lots of other like really famous, successful people that end up being really depressed and say things like fame's kind of an empty bag, and say, look, you know, fame is not all it's cracked up to be.
Because then you're on a pedestal, and you have to constantly be on that pedestal, and it breaks you down.
So but isn't it great for people to say great things about you all the time and for people to admire and adore you?
Yeah, but then you have to live up to it.
Or you get isolated in your own way.
That-
Like before you were isolated from fame, and fame isolates you from everybody else that's 90% more than fame. Fame's only the 10% of the stars and athletes.
You're only the famous person, not who you were
Mm.
or are.
I can see how it could get empty. The money's hard to see how it could
Yeah.
get empty, but even that, it's like they're always saying, I had an empty spot.
So
It's like someone would be like, you need Jesus.
I guess what Tolstoy would say. Tolstoy would say, like, people that chase money and pleasure and power and wealth and fame, and even that think that, you know, making great art is sort of going to fulfill them, are mistaken. And if they feel happy, it's kind of an illusion. And that the only thing that's really going to satisfy you is having this meaning, and it's belief in God. This is the only thing that's really going to do it. And then you get, I suppose, maybe a more cynical approach. The Russell approach would say, well, that's kind of a fantasy. And Russell would say that probably that the fame and fortune and those things are kind of, they're mixing with a lot of other bad things, I suppose. Maybe the middle ground might be, well, those things, like, again, I would say, like, maybe it's the fact that, like, artists that make a lot of money tend to be kind of temperamental. And the sorts of people who have the personality that allows them to make a great deal of money, whether they're an inventor or an actress or a movie producer, a businessman, they tend to be kind of type A personalities that thrive on challenge. And so once you get to a certain point in your career where you get over the hump and you have like this big giant business that you had to manage, it becomes a little less fun. And it becomes, the sort of challenge becomes humdrum and it becomes routine, and then they get depressed maybe. But it's not that the pleasure and the power and the fame and the money is bad. It's just that the sort of person who's able to achieve a great amount of them is also the sort of person who's going to be easily dissatisfied when they have sort of hit a certain hit the pinnacle of achievement. Thoughts? Agree? Disagree?
Yeah.
I convinced myself. Maybe maybe it's a combination. I don't know. It seems like aren't there? Let me ask this question: how many people have all these the trappings of wealth and fame and fortune? They're like, life is awesome. You know, take a political example again. Like, think about Mr. Trump. Does he lie awake at night thinking, oh, I made that mistake in TV. I said that thing and I shouldn't have said, and now and then trouble again, and I'm dropping the poles. That true cruise. That cruise guy's gonna take over, or does he lie awake at night thinking, what's the point of my life? It's meaningless.
He's secretly thinking about Rosie O'Donnell and horrible things he could say. Rosie O'Donnell and Donald.
But you think about like really famous people, like Trump, or maybe like Richard Branson, or pick your favorite pop star. I don't know who's really big now.
Don't say Justin Bieber. I heard he just got in a wreck and had to celebrate.
I don't know the big mega star, Katy Perry or Bruno Mars or something like that. Do they lie awake at night, stare at the ceiling, wonder if there's a God or what the point of their life is, or are they just Yeah. Now here's a any thoughts on that? Like, do people that have it all, do they feel empty inside, or do they think life is awesome?
Depends, were they started by Disney? If they started by Disney, they're probably going downhill real quick now.
If they were started, you're talking about like a star that got their start at
Lindsay
Disney.
Lohan,
Okay,
Miley
right, yeah.
Cyrus,
Britney Spears, right?
they've all gone downhill. There can think of a few that haven't.
Might just be the chicks. I think Timberlake's still going.
Well, Hillary Duff did all right. I haven't heard anything out of her. Selena Gomez, no, she did just Bieber.
So, any thoughts on the trapping? How about this? So, does your life really need to have a cosmic meaning at all? Is worried about the meaning of life? Is that something? Is that like a non-problem cooked up by philosophers?
Yep.
to give us a job, right?
Give it your own damn meaning and work with it.
How about like that? You do something stuff that's fun. And maybe, I don't know, the meaning might be meaning in making the world a better place. And in, maybe creating great works of art might be something that's like inherently valuable, great works of music, or, telling a great story, or a great iconic painting, like contributing to the world in some way. That's, you might say that gives you a sense of meaning, not particularly a religious form of meaning, with this idea of making the world a better place through art, through helping the poor, through improving the condition of humanity. And maybe that's good enough, and enjoying your life, and enjoying the people around you, being a good friend, a good life partner, and those sorts of things. And not really worrying about the sort of cosmic plan. Maybe that's kind of the middle ground. Of either like fight against the meaningless life and worry every day that, oh, it's a meaningless universe, but I'm going to fight against it. And then this other side, which is like the universe is meaningless, but if you have faith, then it becomes meaningful. This is the kind of middle ground, is like your life is meaningful in the sense that you enjoy it and you find it worthwhile. And maybe that's good enough. You don't need meaning with a capital M. So that'll be that's my pitch on the personal opinion of the instructor of the meaning of life. Okay, review and maybe a little bit on the meaning of life, and then review for the final next time. See you on Thursday.